All right. Well, we'll get started. Let me just say welcome to everybody to the long coffee break. This is, I don't know, maybe the 12th in our series, never-ending series, let's say, of coffee break presentations. And I want to thank everyone for attending today. We are on a recorded presentation, so after the presentation, we'll make that recording available to you and others should you want to share that with others inside or outside of your organization. And just know that on our YouTube channel, there's a stockpile of previous presentations for your viewing pleasure. Please do visit, and if you have other questions or concerns, contact your long representative, and we'd be happy to help you on anything individually. This is a weekly process that we're going through. We're going to talk about next week's at the end of this, but be certain to sign up. We're going to host this at 10:30 to 10:45 every week moving forward. And the only other thing to say is I'd like you to hold your questions until the end of the conversation. I can unmute everyone, but if you see a particular slide that you're on and you have a question on that, please feel free to type it into chat, and then I'll get to that towards the end of the conversation. We're going to try and make this a 15-minute process, and you're welcome to stay afterwards. We'll stop the recording if you have a particular question that you'd like to discuss on your individual project or in general after the recording is stopped. So joining us today from Atmosera is Glenn Gabbard. He is a regional sales manager, and the gentleman who's going to be doing a lot of the presentation today is Brian Levine. He's a director with Atmosera. So at this point, Brian, if you're ready to go, you can start.
Sounds great. Can you see my screen okay?
Absolutely. You're good to go.
Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, the goal of today's condensed presentation is really for us to plant a number of different seeds with what we do and how we do it. We are a manufacturer of air purification systems that are rooted in bipolar ionization. We've been doing that for 17 years. Over the last 7 or so years, we've paired it with continuous measurement and verification or air monitoring systems that give us an intelligent offering to the market. Obviously, healthy buildings is a major trend right now, and we're serving and helping a lot of different buildings. We've installed the technology in 120 million square feet of space, roughly 8,000 commercial buildings, and we have offices all over the globe. The last 12 months have been crazy. We've been trying to help as many organizations as possible. We're not a roll out of bed company. We've been doing this for a while. Over the last year, Norwegian Cruise Line, is the largest owner of cruise ships, installed their technology on all of their boats. We've executed about 25 million square feet of commercial Class A real estate installations for the likes of Empire State Realty Trust and Columbia Property Trust. And working with our reps and a lot of different groups around the country, we've been serving a lot of different schools. So I know with Long in Wyoming, we're working and serving a lot of different schools. We've been able to execute schools in unique districts like Sioux Falls School District, all the air handling systems in the largest school district in South Dakota, all the way up to some mega school districts across the country. Our technology, again, is rooted in dielectric barrier discharge bipolar ionization. Any air ionization system on the market is going to be rooted in core electrodes. Our electrodes vary in length and size and quantity on our core systems, and they're typically located in the supply air of the mechanical system, either in a discharge plenum of an air handler or in a main supply duct. At our systems, we're generating millions of positively and negatively charged air ions per cubic centimeter. The ions that we produce through this technology have a lifespan of 300 seconds. And we're looking to achieve a measurable air ion concentration in the environments that we're treating that would measure or equate out to between 500 and 1,500 positively and negatively charged air ions per cubic centimeter. This can be measured with an air ion counter. As you guys may have heard or know, there's really 3 core benefits to bipolar ionization when engineered and installed properly. Particle agglomeration. All ions carry a charge into an occupied space. All suspended particles have a charge as well. This process agglomerates or attracts particles within the built environment to one another, creating larger, heavier particles that can more efficiently get recirculated to a return filter or exhausted from a space. We're getting a lot of traction because this becomes a layer of disinfection. So in addition to ventilation and air exchange, mechanical filtration, bipolar ionization is an air disinfection technology. So we're actively putting these oxygen ions into an occupied space. The theory is that when they come in contact with a protein spike, at that specific time, they're going to convert into a hydroxyl, which can pull hydrogen away from the crown protein on a virus and essentially inactivate a virus in an occupied space. There's some other benefits. We've been using this technology to help control odors through the years. We have a lot of case studies where it's used to help control VOCs, and we're also using it to help conserve energy. We've seen a lot of different buildings pre-COVID cut back the amount of fresh air and recirculate essentially purified and measured cleaner air, which can have an energy impact. We have a good one-pager for our long colleagues. If you were going to introduce this concept to a client, just wanted to make sure you knew that this is a good one-page asset to spark a conversation and a potential presentation outlining who we are and what the technology is capable of doing. We work every day with design stakeholders. So the largest architecture firm in the country by revenue is Gensler. They've packaged a video on Atmosphere, how it works, and it lives on our website under the technology section. And it's a good 3-minute snippet of why this technology can be valuable to a built environment. Another great statistic about Atmosphere is that since we've been doing this quite a long time, we've been educating a lot of the mechanical engineering community. And so if you were to look at the top 30 engineering firms by revenue, 90% of those firms have specified Atmosphere as basis of design as their air purification or air treatment system in a commercial project. And we're seeing a lot of MEP firms present this as a layer of air treatment to their clients and end users and specify the technology. We have a really solid data deck that's packaged really our body of work of both in situ real world tests as well as structured lab tests. We have structured lab testing, 2 standardized test methods against things like coronaviruses, different superbugs, as well as we have clean air delivery rate testing, which is an AHAM protocol versus VOCs done by Syracuse University, as well as 0.3 micron particles. So the CDC would say evaluate manufacturers' clean air delivery rate testing. We have that. And we also have a tremendous amount of real world case studies where clients have tested and measured effectiveness. Again, stacking technologies is the theme to help mitigate. Purdue University commented that using a BPI technology can further reduce infection risk by 20 to 30% on top of wearing masks. Dr. Yan Chen is a world-class building modeler who came out with this information back at the end of 2020. We have what I consider the latest and greatest classifications for safety for an electronic air cleaner. So UL 2998 is a classification that UL and Intertek has deemed as verified zero ozone. What it means by definition is that over the course of 8 hours, 2 inches off of our electronic air cleaners, there'll be less than 5 parts per billion of ozone generation. Essentially gives it a layer of safety when people are evaluating the technology. What I always say is that an engineered atmosphere solution will not increase background or ambient ozone within the built environment. It's nice and powerful to see ASHRAE commenting on this technology positively in different COVID-19 task force guidelines. This is for reopening schools. MERV 13 filters was guidance, increase air exchange, and also look to incorporate UVC lights or air ionization systems. So different methodology, but nice to see third parties talking about the technology. Our systems look like this. The tubes, again, vary in size and scale. Our largest system has 8 tubes and has a rated capacity to serve 16,000 CFM. If you had a 30,000 CFM air handler, you would use 2 of these 16,000 CFM rated units. They're powered off 120. They draw 0.6 amps per unit, consume 50 watts of power, and again, installed in the main supply air. We have systems that are much smaller in nature, electrodes or tubes that are 3 inches and really 3 inches, 7 inches, 9 inches, 14 inches, 21 inches. We've engineered a tube for all different duct cross sections and air distribution systems. The smallest systems can be powered off 24-volt power, so be powered off a fan coil or PTEC unit. The larger systems today are powered off 120 or 240-volt power. A great rule of thumb is that a system with one tube can purify or treat roughly 2,000 CFM of supply air. If you have many systems or many tubes, you can scale and serve 100,000 CFM air handlers. A great benefit is no straight line duct mounting requirements, no mounting configuration requirements, and low pressure drop. Can easily be installed in any existing HVAC mechanical system. You can see some different installations. Those were larger systems in plenums and main supply ducts off air handlers. These are smaller systems in fan coil units, univents, and supply duct mounted off a package unit. Key thing is getting these tubes into the airflow. The other thing is we manufacture standalone systems. So systems that incorporate a blower, different stages of filtration, ultraviolet light, and bipolar ionization. We're seeing a lot of different school districts increase clean air delivery rate and air changes per hour by implementing standalone air cleaners in those environments, and seeing a lot of interest sometimes when there's not an easy mechanical system to install into. A standalone can be an option. A big part about what we do is combining air measurement and verification with air treatment. So Atmos Smart Induct air quality sensors speak to the air purifiers and intelligently control bipolar ionization based on particle levels, VOC levels, carbon dioxide levels, ozone, formaldehyde, temperature, relative humidity, and carbon dioxide. So we measure continuously 8 parameters of indoor air quality, send this information to a building automation system over BACnet, or we can go in the actual occupied space. So space-mounted sensors, whether they be on the ceiling or on the wall like a thermostat, are very much a major trend right now. And so we try to incorporate sensors into our offering to intelligently measure and control the spaces that we're serving. Hate the title of competing IEQ technologies. You should say complementary. But we feel like we have a different solution than most in that it's active. We're helping control contaminants in the space at their source, rather than relying on recirculation of infectious dose of virus or particles back to an air handler for disinfection. So different than UVC lights, different than mechanical filters, in that we're trying to mitigate at the source of contamination. And lastly, we got a couple minutes left. It's really neat to see groups like Brookfield Properties, one of the largest asset managers in the world, really reposition their assets and say, we're going to implement Atmosair BPI as a layer of air treatment in our commercial office space. Same thing goes for Columbia Property Trust, as mentioned earlier, but they own 40 buildings, some of the most world-class buildings in many cities across the US. You can see that to their CEO, we view Atmosair BPI technology not only as a response to the current health emergency, but as an integral part of our longer-term commitment to well-being in tenants. And so we have some really great references that have installed the technology. We have about 4,000 tubes at LAX Airport, another great reference that would really comment on the technology's ability to control indoor quality and better the indoor environment, as well as measurably control. So reduce particles, reduce VOCs, as well as reduce colony forming units of spores and bacteria. So when and if we can, we always measure. We always try to do our best to essentially custom engineer a solution for a customer to meet their kind of satisfaction when it comes to their indoor air quality goals. That's who we are in a nutshell. We're proud and honored to have really helped roughly 120 million square foot of commercial properties, but there's many more buildings that we can help as we move forward, and really appreciative of the partnership with Long to be able to try to help as many buildings and people as possible. That's kind of our core 15-minute presentation. Didn't want to go over. So I know I said a lot of information there. There'll be a lot of questions after the presentation. More than happy to help on client-facing presentations, where we talk about these concepts over an hour and people can really digest a lot of the information. But thank you for the opportunity.
Well, and thank you, Brian, for all the information. As a recap, we have many different methods as HVAC designers in order to provide a clean as possible space. There's not a lot we can do inside the room. A lot of times we're looking at air handlers where we've got a mechanical way of cleaning, like with standard filters, even higher rated ULPA or HEPA filters. UV lights do a very good job at what they see, at what's actually at the air handler itself. But the interesting part about bipolar ionization is it actually reaches from the air handlers into the space itself and can affect things other than just coronavirus. It works on VOCs and other particles that are way too small that would have to typically use a carbon filter or something like that. It agglomerates those and then allows filters within the air handler to work better, or else works to neutralize that in the space too, without trying to dose the space with UV light or other ideas that have been presented by other manufacturers. So that's what gets me so excited about a technology like bipolar ionization with Atmos Air. And you may find other uses for it in the projects that you work on. Please let us be your advisor on these technologies moving forward, and certainly send me any questions that you've got. At this point, this is open to questions, so please type your questions in should you have any. But one of the questions I often get, Brian, is how does bipolar ionization by Atmos Air compare to needlepoint ionization that we may have seen from others?
Yeah, great question. Something that we're consistently asked, and I have a couple of slides here at the back that will talk a little bit about the differences in the core technology. So as mentioned earlier, to create air ionization, we require electrodes. So needlepoint ionization typically is using, you're seeing a lot of brush electrodes. Typically those electrodes are about 1/4 inch. And they're using high frequency technology either to apply a direct current into the individual needlepoint and have one needlepoint create a positive ion and one create a negative ion, or you're seeing an alternating current pin ionizer essentially being mounted on a coil face or within an air handling unit. The first thing that stands out to me is the design of our systems. Something that we love about the patent is that the core electrode is protected. So we have an electrode that's shrouded by a tube. The electrode is also much longer. And essentially if you remember that picture of how it works, we're creating a non-thermal plasma discharge on the outside of our tube. If you were to look in the air handler and the air handler was pitch black, you would see a purple discharge and plasma created on the outside of these tubes. And the one thing we're doing is we're ionizing oxygen, which needlepoint ionization is much weaker and uses a different and a lower input voltage so that they don't ionize oxygen. But why ionizing oxygen is so important is because you're going to create reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species, or ROS, are what is required to mitigate a virus with this technology. You need superoxide anion, O2 minus, to essentially surround a protein and break down the protein and structure of a virus with this technology. You can't do it without ionizing oxygen. So that's a big difference. We're operating at 12.6 electron volts, slightly higher power without creating measurable ozone. But so the fact that we can essentially create superoxide anion, which is integral for being able to mitigate virus with this technology. Less recombination because of the design. We're using alternating current and have a lot of redundancy with all these tubes so that the ions can move further away from the emitter. They have a lifespan of roughly 300 seconds versus needlepoint, usually around 30 seconds. So it's not that needlepoint has not or doesn't have any impact. You can see a chart here saying limited impact. typically closer to the needlepoint ionization system, you can have an impact. But produces superoxide anion is a big thing for virus mitigation in today's world. And the other thing is exposed electrodes. Our systems can be easily maintained. You take out a tube, you screw in a new one, because over time, medium voltage into a core electrode and just contaminants in the air is going to wear down that emitter. Needlepoint emitters are much smaller, typically packaged out of Asia. They're typically cheaper, and so you're putting a relatively medium voltage and then combining that with particles and stuff that are flying around the needlepoint emitter that's exposed, and over time, those are going to wear and foul quickly. Very similar, if you can think of ionization being created by electrodes, very similar to a spark plug in your car. So we have a white paper on the differences between the two technologies, and hopefully a couple of those seeds stood out.
Very good. Well, and I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that with the ozone, that denominator has changed, right? We typically deal with parts per million, and what we're presenting here today, as you can see, that has been verified by all this testing, is parts per billion. So we're talking a very small concentration overall, and that's why we have no effect really on background ozone levels as we install this. A question that's come in is the tubes themselves. How often do they need to be replaced?
Optimally, the tubes would be replaced every 18,000 hours. We've seen some customers replace between years 2 to 3, and they feel successful in that. 18,000 hours is every 2 years. That's on the cut sheet. Some folks have gotten more longevity out of the tube. The big thing is it can be replaced, just like a filter UV light. It's not going to work forever. The ease of replacement is simple. It's like screwing out a light bulb, unscrewing a light bulb, putting in a new one. But after about 2 years, you're about 90% efficiency of ionization generation off the tube. That will decay over time, so it doesn't just shut off. But installing a new tube will essentially ensure optimal air cleaning via ionization, because it's going to essentially bring the system back up to spec.
The last question that we have here for you, Brian, is the install. You've shown some pictures that it seems like it's in an air handler, in a return path, maybe in a supply path. Is there an optimal spot that a designer would like to put this within an air handler?
Great question. 95% of the time, we're trying to get these systems on the supply side, so downstream of coils, downstream of final filters, because that infrastructure is essentially going to mitigate or ground a lot of the free ions that we're creating. So this is a discharge plenum above a down discharge. This is a main supply duct off an air handler, roughly 30,000 CFM. On the supply side is optimal, because there'll be less grounding through that infrastructure, and the ions can then transfer into the occupied space with the lifespan of 300 seconds. And so just yesterday, we were at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. We're installed in every air handler in that stadium. And we were measuring on the field, at field level, air ionization levels with an air ion counter. Did a tube change and did commissioning of that tube change. So it's amazing that in a 100,000 CFM air handler, you can present ionization to the base of the arena, to the seat level, and cover a pretty wide volume of space.
Well, very good. Thanks again, Glenn and Brian, for all the attention in the presentation today. Again, I'll remind everyone that we'll have a recording of this. We also have a presentation next week, Fans Reimagined, in which we'll talk about QPAC fans. So please join us for that at the same time at 10:30 next week. Brian and Glenn, please stay on. But to everybody else, thanks for your attendance and have a great day.